5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's that? What's the emergency?
21 years ago, on September 11th, 2001, nearly 3,000 people lost their lives. These 7 people could have been among the casualties had it not been a twist of fate that kept them out of the World Trade Center's Twin Towers in Manhattan on that fateful Tuesday morning. On today's episode, we cover James Stefferuk's twist of fate. His morning commute involved taking the subway from 14th Street and 7th Avenue into the Trade Center, taking those giant escalators up to the ground floor, grabbing a coffee and paper at the newsstands, then walking outside through the glass doors. He'd then walk a block from his office to the Trinity building. At the time, he was involved in trade stocks, which typically required him to be in the office at 9 a.m. He knew that morning, on September 11th, he had an unusually slow calendar. Still, even on a slow day, he's usually in by 9 or 9:15. But for some reason, he took his sweet time that morning getting ready and was running 20 minutes behind schedule. When he turned on the TV, at that point, he saw what was happening. His apartment had a rooftop deck with views of the Trade Center, so he immediately walked up the stairs and gazed southward down 8th Avenue. He stayed there and eventually watched the 2 buildings collapse. Had he taken the subway down at the normal time, around 8:30, he may not have been so lucky. Brenda Christensen, a Southern California resident at the time, never missed her annual media tour, a week-long string of appointments held with clients, editors, and reporters at the Twin Towers in Manhattan for the public relations business, except for the one on September of 2001. Every single year, she was in New York City for work in the fall. Her first appointments were always in the Twin Towers. Instead of being in downtown Manhattan that year, she recalls the one year she decided to go on vacation instead. Was 2001. She spent the night at a hotel in New Orleans for a stayover, en route to meet her sister-in-law in Jamaica. She later then woke up in the French Quarter to the horrific news, not knowing if any of her colleagues and staff were decimated as they were near the towers in Lower Manhattan. A broken heart saved her life. Crystal Brown Tatum, CEO and president of Crystal Clear Communications, says it was her decision to end the relationship that may have saved her life. See, in 2001, she was engaged to being married and planned to relocate in New York City. In June, she had a job offer from Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, working in Twin Tower 2, but unfortunately, she discovered some things that caused her to call off the wedding. And lucky for her, that was right when 9/11 happened. She was numb because she would have been working in the World Trade Tower 2 on that Tuesday. Just going through a broken engagement was painful, but it was the twist of fate that probably saved her life. He's never been so thankful for car trouble. On September 10th, 2001, George Keefe drove his brand new BMW through Central Park and the vehicle shifted into first gear unexpectedly. He made an appointment at the dealership for 7 the following morning with the hopes of making it to an 8 a.m. meeting in downtown Manhattan. Keefe tells that what happened next was one of the inconveniences he will never complain about. He got to the BMW dealership at 7, but the mechanics refused to work before 8. So he waited patiently an hour for a 3-minute repair. He left the shop and raced down the expressway to get to his meeting on the 73rd floor on the Tower 2 of the World Trade Center. He recalls, he was sitting on the expressway in traffic when he saw the smoke coming out of the first tower that was hit, and turned on the radio to hear that a small plane that had crashed into it. At that point, he glanced behind him at the Hudson River and saw a jet flying lower than he ever seen in his life. He couldn't take his eyes off it, and that's when it smashed into the second tower. He said the fireball was enormous and he had never seen anything like it. At that point, he knew it was a terrorist attack. As he thought to himself, many people he knew didn't make it. It's still an emotional thing. A cigarette break saved her life. Corinne Epstein, at the time an executive director at Morgan Stanley in the second tower, recalls she arrived at 7:30 a.m., checked her mail, met with some of her staff members, and had visited the cafeteria on the 43rd floor for her morning coffee and bagel. At 8:40, she received a call from a coworker who suggested she prep for her later meeting over a cigarette. So she grabbed her cigarette case and headed to the elevator. Now the elevator car jumped and bounced as she reached the ground floor. She even thought to herself on the way out, I'm not taking that elevator again. She made a note of the cart number and turned towards the revolving doors. And through the glass windows, she saw people ducking, flaming paper raining down from the sky. She remembered looking up and seeing a huge hole in the side of the first tower. She heard someone say a plane had hit it. She watched for a while and saw people holding on to the outside of the windows way up on the building, and then suddenly they were just letting go. That's when she saw a plane coming from the south, flying right toward the second tower. She felt like the world was ending. She was laid off just in the nick of time. Laura Gelman rode the Port Authority subway train through the World Trade Center station on her commute each morning. That was before she was laid off on Friday, September 7th, 2001. She would have been there if she weren't laid off 4 days before. And as it happens, she had planned to go to the unemployment office next to the World Trade Center that morning, but was waiting until after rush hour, so she never got on the train that day. Her mom's persistence saved her life. Holly Winter, September 11th, 2001, was going to be the day of a nice reunion for her and her college friends. But her own mother's intuition saved her. Holly Winter, who lived in Denver at the time, said she was supposed to be at the Twin Towers on September 11th with her two best friends from college who lived in Chicago and New York City. And because the NYC friend worked non-stop, Winter and her other best friend set their calendars for a surprise breakfast picnic on September 11th in New York. It was the only date that worked for the both of them. Their plan was to fly into the city the night before, then show up at his office at 8 a.m. with a breakfast of champagne and caviar, his favorites. She then called her mom, who lived upstate New York, to let her know that she was coming to town. Then out of the blue, her mother said she was coming to visit her instead. So her schedule was more flexible. She refused to say it felt like the right time to visit. So Winter then canceled the trip with her friends. Her Chicago friend decided to make the trip without her, and the surprise worked just as planned. They called at 8 a.m. They laughed, talked, hung up the phone, and she lost them both.